Gamers, the most interesting species this planet had ever seen, consisting of men and men disguised as women, because as we know, the female gender isn't real. Women were invented by the government, and any girl who approaches you is an agent of the state. Pull out your 12 gauge, load the shells, and blast her brain. The lifespan of gamers is between 20 to 30 years, after which they'll either die due to lack of sleep over speedrunning a children's game.
No way!
You shut the hell up!
Or they'll end up in prison due to their intrusive thoughts winning, mostly depending on which game they were maining. In their short lives, these creatures will repeat quite a dull and uninteresting cycle every day, waking up, going to school, playing games, hitting the gym, and going to bed, believing their lives would somehow automatically do a 180 at some point because they watched one Andrew Tate edit.
And I'll finish with a quote from my late father.
The question is, do these individuals feel anything? I mean, look at their life cycles. The most human interaction they have is talking with ChatGPT. They probably learned eye contact through YouTube tutorials, but it's actually not that hard to get under their skin. From the beginning of time, there had always been role models. People who were superior in some way to the general population and influenced them to be just like them. Mahatma Gandhi, Albert Einstein, Marilyn Monroe, or even Steve Jobs. People picked their role models based on how relevant they were to their ultimate goal. But my generation, on the other hand, didn't have to look much into their role models. One day, everyone woke up and suddenly decided a depressed man staring at a hologram, a naked psychopath chasing women with chainsaw, and a guy who drives a taxi is literally them.
I can't afford to get stopped anywhere.
Hey, come on over, have some fun with Crazy Taxi!
The role models of my age aren't even real people. It's really not that hard to touch the feelings of the new generation. It's actually much easier to intrigue the emotions of a gamer than a movie freak. I mean, you could always just trash talk someone who lives a 12-hour flight away from you and tell them to kill themselves because they didn't clutch a 1v5, which basically means they don't have any reason to live anymore. But that's child's play. What I'm talking about is making these hardened, broken men of today's society, who spent a significant amount of their lives just staring at a monitor to show emotions despite there not being much to care for in their lives, without insulting them. There are lots of tools that can portray a memorable story. We have books, which you probably never read one, movies, which you end up adapting the personality of the coolest characters after watching them, or even anime.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Let me make it simple. In almost every movie you watch or every book you read, you play the role of a passive observer, someone who isn't actively included in this story. You witness what the protagonists do, what they go through, what they learn, but that's exactly what keeps you from connecting to the protagonist to the max. This invisible wall that only allows you to watch, not touch, stops you from being a participant in this story. Not that I claim movies cannot be impactful at all. We know for a fact that any movie or series that isn't She-Hulk or Wednesday is automatically good. But I personally believe that the max potential of video games is much more than movies. No matter what game you are playing, you will always play the protagonist. You are the one who controls them, establishes their connections with other characters, and make their choices. You live through the story these characters experience because you are actively a part of it. If we compare watching movies and playing video games to real life situations, watching a movie feels like hearing someone tell you about a crazy experience they once had, but playing a game feels like you having that crazy experience yourself. This is why you are more likely to remember a story from a video game in details rather than a movie. That's the real appeal of these addictive machines, isn't it? The fact that I can buy a battle pass and start grinding V-Bucks. Oh, that was another video, sorry. The fact that I can fight the law as a cowboy instead of watching one, or I can be the hero who saves his city instead of watching him. I can even become the cool kid of my school and beat the living shit out of my classmates, instead of, well, getting bullied myself. So what does this mean exactly? That if I write a story and let you play through it, it'll automatically become a core memory for you? No, of course not. I hope that question didn't actually cross your mind, because by that logic, Forspoken would also be an experience you'd want to remember. Oh, you will remember it, but not because you want to. Just because you have a loaded gun doesn't mean you're gonna hit your target. If it did, my R6 KD wouldn't be so shit. There should never be a giant gap between the journey of the protagonist protagonist and the real life of the player. Of course, the element of unrealism is one of the most appealing aspects of playing video games, but if we just take it one step further from brainless fun, we can make people leave a piece of themselves in these pixels. What people need to see are elements that they have somewhat experienced in their real lives, sometimes not even shown directly, but carefully portrayed through the events of the story. For example, we all came across an edgy blue-haired that complains about literally anything on Twitter. For example, they can feel the misjudgments a character like Lee Everett from The Walking Dead receives. In the eyes of almost everyone, he was a murderer. And yeah, some people also just hated him for other reasons too.
I was, on my way to prison 3 months ago.
No shit.
No shit.
It wasn't for touching kids, was it?
To some extent, everyone's afraid of him, and we as Lee find ourselves in frequent situations that we have to prove ourselves trustworthy to those around us simply because all of them were deluded due to something we did a long time ago, which doesn't even matter anymore. His selflessness, despite the harsh treatments he received from everyone, was something a lot of us could relate to. The way us as players raise Clementine and teach her everything she needs to survive makes us also care about this little girl. And as we go through the next seasons, it hurts us to see this girl go through so much pain and agony, and even see her story nearly come to an end. Because like I said, the first season of The Walking Dead had such an impactful story, we left a piece of ourselves in it. We still feel like we are Lee protecting her. It feels like an incredibly dumbed down version of what a father feels towards his daughter. Something we can all relate to because all of us have, or at least had, loved ones to take care of at some point. A protagonist can be so relatable that it can literally change your overall perspective on many topics. Let's take Red Dead Redemption 2. We're put in shoes of Arthur Morgan, a criminal who robs and kills for a living. So how is it that the death of a ruthless criminal made us all cry? And Micah Bell, who literally stopped a gang that has spilled blood without a shred of doubt, is one of the most hated characters to ever exist. Simple, because when you're playing as Arthur Morgan, you see the world from his eyes. You are just a man who's been dealt a shitty hand and has to play with it. And there are these meanies who don't want you to run away and live happily ever after in an island with the college fund of people's children. Red Dead Redemption 2's story is literally so good that it purposely stretches the ending to give the player a moment to let the story sink in. In fact, this is a technique you will very likely find in any game that considers itself story heavy. The final interaction of A Way Out is unrealistically stretched to give the players time to remember everything they had gone through, or the suspenseful pause in literally every ending of Detroit Become Human, only to give you enough time to either cherish or regret the choices you have made. These are the magical moments, what the entire game has built up to, the period that is supposed to make the player cry or at least show some emotion, which is quite critical, because if the story was shit and the game gave you a period to let the trash story sink in, you'll just end up realizing how awful the game is. I hate to say it, but it's quite worrying. What was the last game you played that made you tear up? I can almost guarantee it has been a while since it was released. We're all aware of how dull and disappointing the AAA gaming industry has become, and based on the statistics, loads of people believe it has hit the point of no return. I don't know about you, but owning the best gaming systems without the ability to experience an impactful story ever again would be one of the biggest wastes I had ever seen.